Good morning.
Good morning.
Last week I was in Crestone, Colorado, which is a wonderful place full of many spiritual centers, probably a majority of which are Buddhist. And I visited the Crestone Mountain Zen Center and several Tibetan stupas. And then came back here to Maba, and I realized something they all have in common, spiritual centers. They all have bumpy driveways. So did the practice center that I attended when I lived in Ireland. Interesting. I wonder if we should see some symbolism in that. Anyway, it's good to be here today with you. My talk is going to be on the 6 Paramitas, perfections of the Bodhisattva path, and my source and guidance for this talk is a commentary by Chan Master Xianyi. So what are Paramitas? The Paramitas can be seen as practices to be cultivated, but in their inner aspect, they are also qualities of mind and realizations of the path. The Paramitas are particularly associated with Mahayana Buddhism, although they do appear in the early Buddhist suttas. They were originally 6, which were eventually extended to 10, but I'm going to stick with the original 6 since Master Xianyi does that too. So these 6 are generosity, morality, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. The Paramitas are associated with bodhisattvas and the altruistic intentions of bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas come to see that craving and clinging to sensuality and the sense of self creates afflictions, troubles, suffering. So the Bodhisattva wishes to help beings free themselves from these cravings and clingings and the troubles that these bring. They want to help others awaken to the truth, to the Dharma, and practice of the 6 Paramitas is the way to do this. The Sanskrit term paramita literally means having reached the other shore. It also means transcendence or perfection. So we cross from the shore of suffering to the shore of liberation. The true essential practice of the Paramitas has to be free from self-attachment and self-cherishing. So according to this sense, the Theravada practices of the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, all of the 37 factors of enlightenment can also be considered Paramitas because, Master Xianyi tells us, they also embody the teachings of non-attachment and selflessness. From the Mahayana standpoint, practice of the Paramitas has to involve practicing for the dual benefit of self and others. If we practice only for our own benefit, it's not really Paramita practice. I'm going to talk a little about each of the 6 Paramitas with Master Xianyi's help, and I hope to help you see how they are important practices that anyone can adopt. One thing I have learned is that Master Xianyi is a very practical teacher. Generosity, or dana, as it's called in Sanskrit, is the first paramita. It can be, I think the reason it's first is that it can be the easiest to fulfill, and we can also realize immediate benefits from it. And generosity can be practiced in 2 modes. with characteristics and without characteristics. Generosity with characteristics simply means that we have a motive for performing a generous deed. Perhaps I feel indebted and I want to repay someone's generosity to me. It's still a good deed, but the motive makes it somewhat impure. There's also generosity with characteristics and intention, and this means you give with the intention of being recognized, or being reciprocated, or of earning spiritual merit. These types of generosity are still better than giving nothing at all, but you can see that they're still self-serving. Actually, generosity and all of the paramitas are antidotes for mental afflictions. So generosity is to cure greed and miserliness. So even if we first practice generosity with characteristics, this will still help us to overcome our greed and lead us to a purer form of generosity. Giving without characteristics means giving freely without selfish motivation. This kind of giving can include giving wealth, giving the Dharma, and giving fearlessness or no fear. The gift of wealth can be money, time, knowledge, and giving one's own body, either in the form of labor or donating part of one's body, as in the gift of blood or an organ donation. I'm always inspired by the number of people where I work at Washington University, where there are a couple of blood drives every year, and how many people respond across the university community. So the first time I went to give blood, I had to fill out a questionnaire. You'll be familiar with it if you've done this. And it asks if you've lived in any certain countries in a certain span of time. And I had lived in Ireland during these years that were specified, so they told me that my blood was no good because I had been exposed to BSE, mad cow disease. So, but the Red Cross, or whoever it is that organizes the blood drives, they make it easy for people who can't give blood to give in other ways, so you can always volunteer to do other things. Giving the gift of Dharma. Master Xianyi says that we shouldn't think of this as something mystical or abstract or out of our reach. It's simply sharing the teachings of Buddhism as you understand them. He quotes His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who says that one who understands dependent origination understands the Dharma. Now, I don't mean to imply, nor I suspect His Holiness, that dependent origination is a simple teaching to grasp. Perhaps you only fully understand the Four Noble Truths. That suffering exists, that it has a cause, which is clinging to our desires, that it has an end, and that the path to the end is the Noble Eightfold Path. Perhaps you can share some aspect of this teaching with someone and help them in that way. You don't have to refer to it as a Buddhist teaching. You should only be motivated to ease the other person's suffering, not to convert him or her to Buddhism. The gift of fearlessness is being able to respond to people's fears and needs with wisdom and compassion, whether it is their fear of death, of poverty, of illness, perhaps going to prison, and so on. And I think we can only help others to be fearless when we can be fearless ourselves. And the only way to be fearless is by dropping attachment to myself or ego. And we do this by focusing on others, not myself. The second paramita is morality, or sila. We practice this by following Buddhist precepts, which at the most basic level are the three pure precepts doing no harm, cultivating virtue, and benefiting all sentient beings. Then there are the 5 precepts, which all lay people can take, which are to refrain from taking life, to refrain from taking what is not given or stealing, refrain from lying and harmful speech, from sexual misconduct, and from intoxication. Monastics take further precepts in which they renounce career, wealth, social status, and other things associated with lay life. But we lay people who enjoy some of these assets, we should also contemplate that such material things are intrinsically empty, meaning that they lack any intrinsic existence, because, in the words of Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, they inter-are with other beings and phenomena, other conditions. Therefore, we shouldn't cling to them, but instead use them wisely to benefit other beings. We should use our body, speech, mind, and other resources to help others without any notions of, this is mine, or I am helping others. Patience is the 3rd paramita. We're told that when there is patience, the mind will be pacified. The body will also enjoy a sense of well-being. Without a peaceful or pacified body and mind, we can become agitated and consumed by inner turmoil, often caused by conflict between the outer world and my own mind, the mind within. And there are 3 ways to practice patience: patience with those who wish to harm us, patience with the environment, and patience in enduring the dharmas. Patience with those who want to harm us means that we don't respond in a harmful way when confronted with ill will. In the words of Jesus, we turn the other cheek. In this way, we are actually developing the courage and skill to protect ourselves as well as others. Master Xianyi gives the example of a Chinese general Sun Tzu, who mastered the art of war. He taught that the best strategy is to persuade the enemy to surrender without fighting. Another martial arts saying is, use 4 ounces to deflect 1,000 pounds. If you've ever practiced Tai Chi or one of the other practices, you'll be familiar with this advice. So with patience, we use wisdom to turn around difficult situations. Patience with regard to the environment means enduring the challenges that come with natural calamities, like tornadoes, storms, extreme heat and cold, and so on. And because our bodies are made of the same elements as the natural world, earth, fire, water, and wind, patience with regard to the environment includes patience with one's own body and its troubles, such as illness. The 3rd practice of patience is patient endurance of the dharmas or phenomena. This means patience with our own experiences of pleasure and pain, all favorable and unfavorable conditions, and seeing that they're empty, lacking an independent self. When we practice these 3 kinds of patience, we are actually contemplating emptiness. When we can understand and have insight into emptiness of self, others, and phenomena, this enables us to master the virtue of patience. Patience can also be worldly or world-transcending. You notice there are more and more shades of and distinctions within this one virtue of patience, and I think these distinctions show how subtle and discriminating these teachings can be. They remind me of the Eskimos' 100 words for snow. So, worldly patience is that which is used in coping with the environment, enduring heat, cold, hunger, thirst, pain, criticism, and fatigue. World-transcending patience goes beyond these challenges that come from outside ourselves. Rather, it is strength, forbearance in integrating the Dharma into one's life, in accepting the difficulties that come from our efforts to practice, and in using our time wisely and fully. Where would any of us be if we expected mastery in practice or enlightenment after just a short time meditating or after our first retreat? The Buddha himself said that patience is the greatest wealth, and that without it he would never have attained Buddhahood. The fourth paramita is diligence, which gives us zeal in our practice. Diligence leads us to make vows and aspirations, which can help us when we start to feel lax or lazy. Diligence in the form of a vow or aspiration can help us keep going and resist the excuse of fatigue or physical discomfort. And vows can be small or they can be big. They can be made for one day or for eons. The Bodhisattva vows, for instance, extend over lifetimes. If you're not familiar with them, there are 4 Bodhisattva vows, which are: beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it. Because these Bodhisattva vows are immeasurable, Zen teacher Taitaku Pat Phelan says, the intention we arouse, the effort we cultivate when we call forth these vows, extends us beyond the limits of our personal identities. Master Xianyi cites an ancient treatise which says that there are 3 types of diligence. First is diligence like armor. Second is virtuous diligence. And third is compassionate diligence. Diligence like armor gives us fearless courage, helping us to overcome all obstacles. Instead of being defeated by challenges, with this first kind of diligence, we take difficulties as part of our spiritual growth and learning. We see problems as opportunities to enhance our skills. Virtuous diligence, or diligence that gathers all virtues, means using Dharma practices like the 4 Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, any of the 37 factors of enlightenment, or the 6 Paramitas. In these contexts, whatever we experience or see, if our whole being is filled with the aspiration to practice, instant to instant, this is genuine diligence. Diligence means we don't pass by any opportunity to practice. Master Xianyi likens it to a bus, a Mahayana bus, which if we get lazy, we could let it go by, sleep in, think we'll take a later bus, maybe in the next lifetime. But a diligent practitioner will chase down the bus if she sees it pulling away from the bus stop. She'll be unwilling to give up any opportunity to practice. Third is compassionate diligence, which is that which benefits sentient beings. This is the diligence of the great bodhisattvas, like Dijang, who pursues suffering beings even into the hell realms to help them gain liberation. The The fifth of the six paramitas is meditation, or jhana in Sanskrit. The purpose of meditation is to focus the mind when it is scattered. When this happens, the mind's inherent clarity shines forth, and this is called wisdom, which we'll look at when we come to the sixth paramita. In the Chan practice of meditation, there is no need to suppress thoughts, and also no need to follow them and be swayed by them. We see that thoughts liberate themselves when we are not attached to them. Chan teaches us to recognize the nature of mind so that we will no longer be troubled by our thoughts and mental chatter. If we remain with attachment or aversion to our thoughts and chatter, this keeps our minds from becoming clear and settled. In this series of talks on Chan that we've had recently here at Maba, I think we've already encountered the idea of sudden enlightenment, which was originally transmitted by Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of Chinese Buddhism. His system, or method, has two aspects, entry by practice and entry by principle. But without getting too complicated, I just want to emphasize that the Chan method uses formal meditation as a foundation, but it also includes all experiences of our daily life as equally important methods of awakening. Also, by studying and contemplating the meaning of emptiness, we purify our mind and our perceptions in order to see the reality, the dharma of interconnectedness, interpenetration of all things, which is what emptiness means. We drop our clinging to self, and this leads to wisdom. And wisdom is the sixth and last paramita. The Sanskrit name is prajna. The Buddha taught that prajna, or wisdom, is an essential part of practicing Buddha Dharma. All the other practices, generosity, virtue, meditation, diligence, are all incomplete without the guidance of wisdom. Master Xianyi refers to correct prajna, which means understanding of causes and conditions. We see this arises, therefore that arises, this ceases, therefore that ceases. In the 12 links of dependent origination, ignorance is the root cause of all suffering. So by dispelling ignorance, the entire chain of causes and effects leading to suffering in samsara goes away. If you're not familiar with the 12 links, they are ignorance, volitional formations, consciousness, name and form, 6 sense bases, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, aging and death. In his commentary, Master Xianyi talks about a number of different ways to categorize prajna. Of course there would be a number of different ways. We don't have the time to go into all of them, but I'd like to highlight a couple of them which seem to me most relevant to our understanding and abilities. First, there's general prajna and specific prajna. General prajna teaches that there is no self inhabiting the 5 skandhas of form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, the heaps of or characteristics that make up a being. Self is an illusion. Specific prajna teaches that we can be equanimous with regard to the 12 links of dependent origination. There's no need to fear them or to attach to them. It's possible to be in the midst of samsara and not be affected. We can remain in the body and mind and still gain liberation. In fact, if one can exist in samsara and not be affected by ignorance and by one's body and mind, this is liberation itself. Indeed, this is the Bodhisattva ideal, to be liberated within samsara in order to liberate other beings. There's also suchness prajna and illumination prajna, two other distinctions. Suchness prajna is present whether you know it or not. This is our innate Buddha nature, our natural awakeness, and its native wisdom. Illumination prajna is the result of attainment. When our mind has shed its self-centeredness and we can use this prajna to benefit other beings and the environment. We have no specific view of the world, but we're able to respond with wisdom to whatever needs we encounter. Master Xianyi gives different methods of practicing illumination prajna, which I would like to share with you. The first foundation practice is to see that this body, this mind, and the environment are transitory and impermanent. So upon this foundation or basis, then there are four types of contemplation: subjective, objective, direct, and absolute contemplation. Subjective and objective contemplation are really the same thing. There is no true objectivity in the world. What we call objectivity is usually just the opinions of the majority or a powerful minority. We need to be aware of our habit of taking my point of view as objective and yours, if I disagree with you, as subjective. In the method of direct contemplation, whatever you see or encounter, you do not apply any interpretation or judgment to it. No labeling or comparing. It's just plain awareness. Master Xianyi says it's not the same as prajna. We can't use it to solve our problems. He says that in direct contemplation, if it comes down to what you would do in a situation, the best you could say is, I don't know. And yet it's a very useful practice nonetheless. And this leads us to absolute contemplation. Master Xianyi says this type of contemplation is madhyamaka, realizing emptiness to achieve liberation. This can sound very esoteric, like a very advanced accomplishment, but Master Xianyi is very practical about it. He says, in absolute contemplation, without imposing one's preferences, one applies common sense, experience, and skill in dealing with people's problems. He says it's not a question of supernatural powers, just dealing with people without interjecting one's own self-centered perspective. So for instance, if someone comes to me who's sick, I don't try to cure him myself. I send him to a doctor. Better yet, take him to a doctor. So to conclude, the paramita of wisdom, prajna is wisdom, and wisdom is the attitude of no self, freedom from a self-centered perspective. The self of wisdom is there to solve problems. The self of compassion is there to benefit people. This is Master Xianyi's very practical Chan teaching. To sum up, the paramitas, or great perfections, are generosity, patience, morality, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. They are the practices of a bodhisattva and are founded on emptiness. When we see and realize our interconnectedness and lack of self, we no longer discriminate between self and other. We give and we give up our attachments. This is generosity, and the other 5 paramitas follow suit. It's so important not to attach to appearances, to our own view of the world. We have to remember that things may not be what we think they are. If we can generously allow others to be, new possibilities of experiencing will be open to us. And always remember that emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. Emptiness is relationships, which means there's no separation between self and the other. When we help others, we help ourselves. May we all take to heart and practice the Paramitas, becoming liberated from self-centeredness so that we may liberate all beings. Thank you.